let us move along right now because, as I mentioned, it is a huge combat sports weekend. And part of the reason why I wanted to have our next guest on was to discuss this. Also, I'm just a huge fan. As someone who tries to pretend like he is a broadcaster, I look up to people like this. So excited that she has taken out a couple minutes of her busy day to join us. She is the host of The Crossover on NBC Sports Network. Also, you've seen her on Access Hollywood. Prior to that, ESPN, Yes Network, so many places. One of the best, if not the best in the business. Michelle Beadle stops by. Michelle, how are you?
Oh, good. That was a heck of an intro. Thank you.
Well, I'm being honest. I've watched you from Yes to, of course, the Mothership to now NBC. You're great. And what I like about you most, I mean, we're a little biased here. When mainstream people, we're kind of like the loser in school. We think that everyone kind of ignores us. And then when we have a mainstream media person who talks about mixed martial arts, who talks about things like pro wrestling, all of a sudden we feel like, yeah, people do like us. We're actually kind of cool. So you validate us.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do. It is weird, isn't it? You know what will happen, though? It'll become trendy, and some moron that's never watched it in their lives will say something great about it, and all of a sudden everyone will say, oh, I loved MMA when, but they didn't. We know the truth.
Now, do you get some pushback from people that you work with, bosses, colleagues? Like, why do you tweet about this stuff? Why are you talking about this stuff?
Yeah, I do get a little pushback, but I always find it funny because, especially with Twitter, it's such a voluntary act of following and followers and, whatever all that stuff is about. So it's, if you don't like it, you don't have to sit there and read it or follow along. I look at Twitter as a place where we all get to kind of just talk about whatever we want. You can plug stuff if you feel like it, or you just have a conversation with a couple 100,000 people that you may never meet. I love that, and I think it's fun. And for me, Monday nights have become just this almost reactionary thing that I do now with just tweeting raw. No one ever asked me to. No one's ever said, hey, that's a really good idea. It just kind of happens, and, I love it. And the same thing for the big fights. I try to make sure I watch, if not all of them, most of them whenever I can. And, yeah, there are a lot more people that I think are fans that we don't realize. And until, I don't know why it's not as mainstream as it should be. And, of course, I'm talking about the MMA side because we all know the wrestling side is a whole nother ballgame. But
yes.
I don't get it. There are still those that, say that it's this, it's violent, it's what have you. But for those reasons, I think most of us are fans in the first place.
How long have you been a fan of all this stuff? Wrestling, just combat sports in general, you seem to enjoy it all. Since when?
I think it goes back to my ancient Roman ancestors
Wow.
in the Colosseum. No, I think I am so the opposite of a fighter / I don't have any kind of physical violence in me, and I think for people like me, we get to live vicariously through what we see on that screen. The idea that you train and train and train, and it all comes down to one evening where you just have a chance to beat this other human being and win and be the best. There's just something so alluring about that, especially to me, because these are actions I will never hopefully have to or will take in my everyday life. And so the violence of it and the grittiness of it, it's as tough as it gets. It also has ruined me for things like baseball, because now I try to go watch a baseball game, I'm bored to tears, and it's just not going to happen.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I won't be offended if you answer this next question in one direction. As far as the totem pole goes, you like pro wrestling a little more than MMA, right?
I think I follow wrestling. You know what though? I do watch a lot of MMA, but I think I follow the wrestling because it's every single week, Monday night. It's appointment programming for me, and I think so. It's just become an easier thing for me to follow. But besides the fact that I love Dana White, I think if everybody in sports had a guy like that, fighting for them, then some of these sports would not be struggling to keep their fan bases.
Do you believe that the UFC has taken a chunk out of WWE's world, has stopped their momentum a bit? Has the rise of the UFC hurt the rise of the WWE?
I don't know, because I think those of us who are fans of both realize one is obviously very real in that these guys are not pulling punches and scripting anything, and the other is just purely 100% entertainment, albeit very athletic, but still entertainment nonetheless. What I do think is that MMA has just almost made boxing completely irrelevant. If we didn't have stories like the Mayweathers of the world that are not the stories that are in the ring, it's more about, the asinine betting and the stuff that he does outside of work, I don't know that we would talk about boxing at all anymore. So for me, MMA has killed boxing. I won't pay to watch a boxing match anymore because I can get everything that boxing has plus some when I give my money to UFC.
You see, I actually think that mixed martial arts has hurt pro wrestling more than boxing because when you watch a UFC event, it looks like a pro wrestling event. The characters, the cage, all that stuff. And if you look at let's get into WrestleMania. It's this weekend. It's in New Jersey, MetLife Stadium. I know you'll be there. We'll talk about it. I think that this is a perfect example as to how MMA, more specifically the UFC, has hurt WWE because you look at this card, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's very flat. You've got 3 rematches at the top. We know what's going to happen. Let's be honest. Is CM Punk, as much as I love the guy, and he's only he's the only reason why I kind of even watch it. And I used to be the diehardest fan of all time. That's not even a word. I was the biggest fan. We know he's not going to beat The Undertaker. Come on, we know he's not going to beat The Undertaker.
I know.
Triple H is going over. We know that, so we know what's going to happen. Doesn't that hurt it a little bit?
Well, I do think there's a lack of new characters. I think that the WWE is in that weird zone right now where, the Triple H's and the Undertakers of the world, while I love having them still around, you also have to get ready to kind of move on and what the future is going to hold. And we've seen them release these new characters. Tensai lasted, 10 seconds. This Fandango character who is ridiculously hateable, and I don't know how long he'll be around. I think what they're doing is they're struggling to bring on people that we can all kind of grasp onto and love. Ryback, The Shield. I'm not 100% sure those are going to be long-lasting names for most of us. But I think that the entrance music and the costumes and the ridiculousness of the over-the-top showmanship is wonderful, and I don't know who got what from whom. All I know is that I like it. I like that the fighters in UFC and MMA come in to this most dramatic kind of their choice of music, and GSP with obviously, which is now a controversial choice in clothing, but nonetheless, it's just part of the whole show, because I think that's just part of it. I think there's that machismo swagger that men need to come into an arena before they beat the crap out of another human being. It's a wonderfully beautiful part of it all.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you were just referring to the Rising Sun controversy, right?
Yeah.
Wow, you're really up to date with all this stuff. That's very insider.
Fashion. It's fashion, so I'm on top of it.
Oh, and I know you've tweeted about MMA fashion. You're not a fan. I'm not a fan as well. But do you go to the MMA websites and things like that? Do you read about this stuff?
I do. I try to keep up with it. There are some characters. I think Sonnen is one of the. He's the Punk of for me. Anyways, he's not afraid to say whatever he wants. Sometimes to the chagrin of basically everyone. I like that. I think there's a difference between that kind of a guy versus a Nick Diaz, who is a little bit crazy and irresponsible and probably a boss's nightmare, but at the same time a definite draw for a lot of us. So I try to keep up as much as I can. It's all characters. And for me, just like I like with the wrestling, it's the storyline that makes the fight that much better.
Don't you feel as though that someone like Nick Diaz is more real than Chael? I work with Chael on Fuel, and it feels to me like going into the Anderson fights, we actually believed he had a chance. Now no one really believes he has a chance against John, and it's all kind of shtick. I don't like that.
No, I agree. I have yet to meet, other than Sonnen himself, anyone who thinks he has a shot against Jones, which I hope so. I mean, the last thing I want is a crappy one-rounder. But, yeah, I think Nick Diaz is probably closer to what most of us are, which, the irresponsibility of it, and then, knowing that you've committed to a certain career and that there are certain duties that come along with that, and he hasn't really grasped that that's part of the deal. I would imagine that's frustrating for those that are around him and in charge of keeping up with him. But he's probably closer to an everyday slack than Sonnen is. I just think Sonnen's smart, and I think he's a wise ass, and there's something about that personally I find myself rooting for.
Now, this may be a little too inside baseball. I don't want to get you in trouble, but you've always gone to the beat of your own drum. A show like The Crossover, right, which started in January. It's new. You're trying to create your own little space. You're such a big fan of this stuff. Why not talk more about the MMA world, the pro wrestling world, things like that, the stuff that the mothership is not talking about, and create your own audience? The niche audience comes to you, and this could be the place where people like me, who is a sports fan but loves this other stuff but can't get it anywhere else, can go congregate and watch.
I know. It's you know what I've noticed? It's baby steps. I mean, even when I was at ESPN, I wanted to have wrestlers on. And we would have a lot of the MMA guys, but they would come through and do the whole car wash, leading up to a fight or right on the heels of one. So it wasn't special, and I think there were a handful of us, even in Bristol, that were fans of the sport. I find myself now, though, for example, this week, starting tomorrow, we have a different WWE wrestler on every day the rest of this week.
Ooh.
Punk is supposed to be on tomorrow, which is, awesome, and I'm so excited about it. We've got Jericho, and the winner of WrestleMania will come in on Monday. These are things I was never allowed to have at my old show, and so now it's kind of, it's nice to have a little bit more say in what we're doing. And look, it's 1 week out of the year. I understand 100% more than most that not everyone loves this stuff, but I also understand that, it is just 1 week, and it's fun, and it's entertaining, and these guys are all professionals with a mic. And, Mark Henry's on Friday, and he may not talk a lot, but he's a visual that everyone needs to see at least once in their life. And so I love it. I love that we're getting a chance this week, if never again, to kind of do what I like most. For me, it's like Christmas all week long.
Yeah, and there is only one Sexual Chocolate. If you have not seen Sexual Chocolate in person, you must see him. So that's good to know he'll be on the show. Now, how do you feel about them using the death of Paul Bear as part of an angle? Is that tasteless in your opinion, or is that fair game?
No, for me, it's not tasteless. I mean, when you have the blessings of the family behind you, and, this guy devoted his entire life, his entire professional life to wrestling. I think, to have died at such an early age, probably not unexpected for a lot of people who knew about him and, his health and whatnot. But I also think that if you believe in all that after stuff and wherever you go when you're all gone, for him to be able to look back and see he's still a part of this and he's still got Undertaker, I don't know. I just think there's something wonderfully whole about the whole thing. And look, the family said, cool, go with it. And as long as they're fine with it, then I don't see how anyone else could possibly complain. And by the way, dropping an urn, pretending like a dude's in it, is hilarious. I don't care who you are.
But did you notice that it sounded very hollow when he dropped it? It didn't feel like anything was in there.
Like, there are no ashes in there. Where is he?
Yeah, which
maybe
maybe
a big part of Sunday.
It adds a new wrinkle into things. Now, Brock, obviously he's fighting, or he's going against Triple H, which again, to me, Triple H is one of the main reasons why I stopped watching wrestling, because I felt every time he was just such a buzzkill. Every time he'd win,
right.
and I didn't like him. I liked nothing about him. I thought he was only there in that spot because he was marrying the boss's daughter. Brock, to me, in his return, it feels a little underwhelming. He's wearing the yellow shoes. He's bouncing side to side. It doesn't feel like the Brock of old, even the Brock from the UFC. Are you digging him?
You know what? He had that, was it the initial, not the contract signing night, but I think it was the week before, when there was actual blood drawn and, he had the staples and all that, which I always find funny because everyone's like, that's fake. I was like, no, because every once in a while, that's real blood. So you
it's ketchup.
No, it's real. I'm hoping for the best. I still think Triple H puts on a great show. I still haven't figured out how to spit water twice, and I do practice it, and it doesn't make sense to me. I hope they really let these two monsters go and have fun and let it kind of drag out for a little while. I don't care much about the backstories. You're going to lose your job if you lose. All that stuff is junk to me. I don't care. But I just kind of hope that they let these two really battle it out and get a little violent. And, if we see a little blood, I think it makes it that much better.
Now, as a fan,
they're two big guys. I want to see it.
Absolutely. And the first match was, I keep saying fight because we're so used to talk. We're kind of breaking all the rules here, by the way. I don't know if you know this.
I know. But I'm like, oh, crap, all the vernacular. We're getting it wrong.
No. But you're right, because I'm used to talking about fights and real things. But deep down, we're all pro wrestling fans. The first match was a little underwhelming, so that's why I'm not really buying this one. But, last year at WrestleMania, we had Maria Menounos. She was in a match.
Yes.
And as a fan of yours, as someone who knows that you tweet about this, you're now part of the NBC Universal family. And up until last week, they didn't have a celebrity involved. They announced P. Diddy recently, but I doubt he'll do anything as far as physical. So I thought there was a chance. It makes sense. Michelle Beadle, she's part of the family. They're on USA. Why haven't they asked you to be a part of WrestleMania?
You know what? I don't know. They've been really good to me. They basically told me to kind of block off my week this week, and I will be going to all the events and having fun. And the last I heard, I may be doing something at WrestleMania. I'm just not 100% sure what yet. They know very much that if I ever was allowed to fight anyone, I would like to fight Vicky Guerrero. I've made that very clear. Yeah.
Why?
I'm not interested in the diva stuff. I don't find them to be. I find them to be the weakest link, and I think everyone else does too. Hence the absence of diva matches during Raw for the last several weeks. But for me, Vicky Guerrero is annoying enough that I know I would be on the side of good if I was to fight her in the ring.
But is this X-Pac heat? Is this channel changing heat that we're talking about, or do you actually don't like her and you think it will be a good match?
I don't know. You know what? I don't know. No, they've gotten rid of so much of the female aspect of wrestling lately that there is no channel changing anymore. And I know that sounds horrible, and I should want the women to come out and be strong, but it's interesting how it was lacking so much story and just no interest. I mean, even my guy friends, like, I know that the divas aren't aimed towards me, but even my guy friends were getting up to go to the bathroom when they were out. So I know they're going to have to be a part of Mania. It'll be interesting to see what they do with them, because they have been gone for so many weeks, at least from Raw. I'm not big on the SmackDown, but from Raw, we've seen nothing.
Okay, 3 minutes or so left with Michelle Beadle. Really appreciate the time. I know you have to tape your show, so
absolutely,
the fun and games are about to end for you. Now, speaking of women fighters, I'd love to hear your take on Ronda Rousey, because she's someone who is, blowing up, and she speaks, kind of shoots from the hip and all that stuff. Are you a fan of hers?
I absolutely love her. I remember she was at, God, what fight was that? It was in Jersey, I want to say 2 years ago, year and a half ago, before she'd even come over at that point. And I remember, I very rarely ask to take my picture with anyone. I just think it's dorky, and, I'm too old. But I remember taking my picture with her. I accidentally spilled beer on her. I was like, oh my God, this is the worst moment. I love her. I think the fact that she is as good at what she does as she is, and she's gorgeous, and she's smart, and she's witty, and she really doesn't take crap from anyone. I think it's great, and I hope that they continue to find people for her to beat up, because it's going to get boring if we can't find anyone to step into the ring with her, because I think she's making such a name for herself, and I'm excited for everything that's out in front of her right now. It's one of these strike while the iron hot is on hot moment, and I'm pumped. I think she's very easy to cheer for.
She may not fight someone by the name of Fallon Fox, but I don't know if you've heard of Fallon Fox.
Yeah.
Transgender, right? She's trying to make a name for herself. Should she be allowed to fight females, in your opinion?
God, I was so torn when this whole predicament came out the first time. Was it Cyborg's going to fight her? Is that what?
No. People have suggested that it would be a fair fight if Cyborg fought her, but no, she is not. They're not fighting, at least not now.
It's, what it is, and I've listened to so many different opinions, and I've read so much on it, because my initial reaction was, well, she should have a shot, and it should be fair, da-da-da-da. But then you go back into it, and you realize, she lived the majority of her life as a man, trained as a man, has the musculature of a man. It becomes a very gray area. I don't know that it is fair to now all of a sudden put her in a ring with a woman. You know what? I'll say this. In my lifetime, I didn't think we'd have a problem like this that we would be able to talk about and have to think about. And it's crazy, because if she's not allowed to fight the women, she isn't going to fight the men. I have no idea what they're going to do with her. It's a weird little world for her right now.
Okay, final question. Why should the listeners, the loyal fans, the millions and millions of fans of this show, the MMA Hour, fans who, as I said at the top, the ugly ducklings, the ones who have been ignored their whole life, why should they watch the crossover, 6 p.m. Eastern on NBC Sports Network? What is out there for them on this show?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. What better way is there to spend 22 minutes of your life? And I am a fellow ugly duckling / nerd / but the thing is, you finally realize as an ugly duckling nerd that you really don't care what everybody else has to say about you, and it's a wonderful place to be. My co-host is in the percentage of people who judges and laughs at us, and I annihilate him on the daily. So if you want to come fight the good fight with me, I would watch the crossover. And we talk about other things as well, but stuff that I don't want to talk about doesn't make the show. So if you were looking for a lot of baseball coverage, I probably wouldn't watch the crossover. Other than that, anything's fair game.
Well, as a one-time fan of the sport, Montreal Expo is no longer with us. That is great to hear as well, and that's why I enjoy the show. Again, this has been a huge honor for me. Wanted to have you on the show for a very long time. Keep up the great work. It's been amazing watching you grow from the Yes Network here in the New York City area to now Access Hollywood, Olympics, all that great stuff, and keep supporting the ugly ducklings of the world, MMA, pro wrestling, all that stuff. Thank you so much, Michelle.
We must be true to ourselves. Thank you so much for having me.
And enjoy Mania this weekend. And if you do get in there or have a Bob Uecker moment where they choke you and all that, think of us.
I will. I will.
Thank you, Michelle. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
There she is, Michelle Beadle, stopping by, host of the NBC Sports Network show, the crossover. Of course, she's on Access Hollywood. She's been on the Olympics. A true pro. I mean, unbelievable stuff that she does on television, and so great of her to stop by. She's taping her show later today, so a very busy schedule. We really appreciate it. And you can follow her on Twitter. Twitter.com/Michelle D. Beadle is her last name. Beadle is Beadle. Let her know that you enjoyed her spot on the show today.